Okay, Rabbi Isai. It is what it is. What time is it?
Make sure to speak in this. Just for the people.
What time do you have, Shamai?
5:10.
It's too late. Let's go.
Rabbi, you
Okay,
could say
Rabbi-
controversial things because you're not being recorded.
What?
You could say
So
controversial
who's
things.
phone
you're
is
not
it? I
being
just want to...
recorded.
Oh, okay, Ariel, don't... Now you're stuck here for a while.
Yeah, this is. Hey, 40 minutes.
Okay, Rabbi Isai. So the question was like this. We're actually going to be talking about a sugya that we're learning in the morning. That's why I'm very excited about this. It's going to be like a little shir klali in what we're learning in the morning. But we're going to introduce it with a shaila was like this. There was a baal teshuva, someone who was married for a couple of years, and then eventually saw the light, and he decided to become baal teshuva. Him will make the story happy. His wife also became a baal teshuva, and everything was just hunky-dory. Now, he had multiple kids. He had a bunch of kids before he did teshuva. So he wrote the Lev Avram. He wrote a shayla. He says, you know what? I already have a boy and a girl. We know the mitzvah of Pirivivya is a boy and a girl. I'm already a little bit older. Do I have to once again do Pirivivya? Or was I Yoitze in my previous life?
He's already Jewish.
So yeah. So what's the
His wife is
question?
Jewish.
What in the world is the question? Why? What is the question? We'll get to it. Very good. What is the question over here? What are you going to say? Well, in my previous life, when we had these kids together, we weren't from, so obviously we didn't keep Taretz Mishpacha. So the kids were basically called B'nai Nida. So that was the shayla. Since the kids were B'nai Nida, maybe he did not fulfill the biblical commandment of Pruvu. Fine.
Well, they didn't go to the ocean.
So that is the question. Now, what does it mean? What's the question? Certainly, if you have the kid is called 100% Jewish and a upstanding member of the community, doesn't make a difference whether the mother was a nida or not nida. That's even though we know if you live with someone that is a chai bekrisis, that the kid is called a mamzer, right? What's a chai bekrisis? Someone who's a sister, with his mother, or it's a ish. We are well aware that union creates a mamzer, but the only exception to the rule is nida. So a ben nida does not create a mamzer, even though if you live with a nida, you chai chorus. The philosophical reasons behind that we could talk about later. But that's the bottom line. So the bottom line is that these kids that were born in his erstwhile life, in his previous life, bottom line, they are kosher and there should be no issue. So what was this guy's shayla? The shayla is, the bottom line is, when he created these kids, he was doing an avera. And we all know the rule that we learned in the morning, mitzvah baba avera is not called a mitzvah. So bottom line is, in his previous life, when he created these kids, he was doing an avera, right? He was being baal nida. So seemingly, you should not be yoitze the mitzvah. You should not be yoitze Pirivivya, because when you did the Pirivivya mitzvah, when he did the Pirivivya mitzvah, he was doing an avera. So you should apply the din of mitzvah baba avera. Now, what are the sources of mitzvah avera? You learn in the morning what the sources are, but this was the question. So the truth is, we could have a similar. That question was when the child was created through a union between a man and a nida. But obviously, you can have the same question through any type of union that creates a child that incurs that is through an avera. For example, an ish cheats on her husband. The one who cheated with her and they had a kid. Is that kid considered a yoitze pirivivya with that kid? Right? Because it was created through an avera. Oh. Now here we have to make a distinction. That's going to be very important for later on this year. A mamzer that is born through a illicit union, there could be two shilas. One shilah is you're not yoitze pirivivya because mitzvah b'aver. That's what we discuss now. And the latter part, if we get to there, the latter part of this year, we may discuss. Forget about the mitzvah b'aver. The kid himself is a mamzer. And maybe God don't like mamzer too much, and it's not called you populated the world. God wants you to populate the world with upstanding pedigree, and mamzer or not, but two different shilas. For example, so let's get it straight. By the ben nida shilah, you don't have the second shilah. By ben nida shilah, the ben of a nida is 100%. His pedigree is considered 100%. He's considered pure. He's not a mamzer. So by the ben nida shilah, you only have the shilah. Well, it was created through a mitzvah babaver. By the mamzer shilah, someone cheats an ish and they have a kid. You have two shilahs. One shilah is it's a mitzvah babaver, so you're not yotza privya. The second shilah is forget about that. Bottom line is what you created was a mamzer, a second degree person per se, a lower level person, at least in pedigree per se. So maybe that's not called your yotza derivya. But again, right now we're going to concentrate on the first shilah of mitzvah babaver. No, the truth is, you open up a Shulchan Aruch. It's right there in the Shulchan Aruch. You open up a Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah brings down from Yerushalmi and the Ramban and Rashba that say openly you are yotza pir v'rivya, even though the kid is a mamzer. And the simple understanding of the Yerushalmi is it doesn't make a difference how that mamzer was created. Even if that mamzer was created through an illicit union, you are yotza pir v'rivya. Meaning, you could have a mamzer, we spoke about this last week, you could have a mamzer created not through illicit union. You could have a mamzer created, a mamzer marries a mamzeres, or a mamzer marries a ger. You also have a mamzer. But that's not, you don't have a mitzvah baver shilah either. There you only have the other shilah. Well, bottom line is, you brought a second degree type of person, a lower pedigree type of person. But be it as it may, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah at least, the Ramah, very important, brings down, without any type of qualification, you have a mamzer, you are yotza the din of mitzvah bavera, and the implication is, even if the union was an illicit union. Fine. And there is no problem with mitzvah bavera. It seems that the Ramah is not worried about the problem with mitzvah bavera. The question is, why is he not worried about the problem with mitzvah bavera? Fine. The Ritah Gazi, the famous Ritah Gazi in Bechayris, right? So he questions this. Why does he question this? He says, if you look, the Shulchan Aruch himself does not bring this down. The Ramah only brings it down. Only the Ramah brings down that if you have a kid through a illicit relationship, a mamzer, you're yotza pir v'rivya. And he says, if you look, the main shloshei hayra, the main people who we rely on to give psak din are who? The Rosh, the Rambam, and the Rif. Those are the three main gedolim that we rely on. None of them bring this down. None of them bring this down that if you have a kid through a illicit relationship, meaning you have a mamzer, you're yotza. The only ones who bring it down is the Ramban and the Rashba. And the Ritah Gazi said, you know what? He opened up the Yerushalmi, which is the source, and if you look at the Yerushalmi there, the way it says it, it actually does not at the end come out with anything definitive. The Gemara brings there in Yerushalmi, Rabbi Abba had an inquiry, a question. What's the question? Are you yotza if the kid is a mamzer? Are you yotza pir v'rivya if the way you created was through an avera? And the girsa that the Ritah Gazi brings down is that the Yerushalmi equivocates, doesn't have an answer. So the Ritah Gazi wonders, now he understands why the Rosh and the Ramban, the Rosh and the Rambam and the Rif don't bring this down la Halacha, because the Yerushalmi himself doesn't seem to know. And he wonders why the Ramban quotes the Yerushalmi that says, oh, no problem, you are yotza pir v'rivya, even though the kid was created through an illicit relationship, even though the kid is a mamzer. So the Ritah Gazi says there must be there with different girsas. There must have been that there were different girsas, and the Ramban and Rashba had one girsa, that the Yerushalmi, yes, definitively said you're yotza, and the other Gedolei Hara did not have that girsa. No. And the Ritah Gazi says, l'chayra, he says the same thing. He says he doesn't understand. How is it possible that you're yotza pir v'rivya if the way you created the kid was through an illicit relationship? This should be mitzvah haba'ah. And the Ritah Gazi says, that's his bottom line. His bottom line is, since the Rosh and the Rambam and the Rif don't bring it down, it must be that you're taka not yotza. If the way you brought about the kid was through an illicit relationship, definitely through a chorus relationship, you are not yotza because of mitzvah haba'ah. That is his bottom line. And that is why he said Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it. Now, here, the Ritz Agazi says, wait a minute. Maybe we could say like this. So, he's got a problem, but the Yishalmi does deal with it. Okay, maybe the Yishalmi equivocates, but the Yishalmi does deal with this issue. So the Ritz Agazi starts saying, wait, maybe there is no problem, mitzvah ba'aver b'shoigig. Maybe the Yishalmi is dealing in a case where you lived with, someone lived with a chorus relationship. It was a mistake. The Gemara's filled with that. You go into a dark room, it comes out to be your sister, not your wife. The Gemara case like that, right? So, it was a shoigig. So, here's the question. Do you say mitzvah? I'm sure you talked about it in the morning. I hope you did. Is there a din of mitzvah ba'avera when the avera was not done intentionally, willfully, if the avera was done b'shoigig? Right? So we have riots from our Gemara in Meruba to this, from place in Meruba. But the Ritz Agazi said, no, it must be that there is mitzvah ba'avera even b'shoigig. And it brings a definitive proof from Tosfos. Because I'm sure you saw in the morning that Tosfos says in Sukkah that the Gemara in Pesachim says you should know that if you eat matzah that's tevel, right? We all know what tevel is. If you eat matzah that's tevel, what's the law? You're not yoytza the mitzvah of matzah and Pesach. So you figure you have produce, you didn't take off the trumas and the maasros, etc., and you turn it into matzah. You're not yoytza. And the Gemara brings a pasuk to teach you this law. The Tosfos says, why do I need a pasuk for? What do I need a pasuk for? Of course, if you eat matzah that's tevel, I'm not yoytza, because it's mitzvah ba'avera. That's Tosfos' question. What do you need a pasuk for? We have the cardinal rule, everyone knows, there's a vera. What is Tosfos' answer? He has no answer. Tosfos in Sukkah leaves it with a sarach ian. Okay, all the Achronim try to give different answers. But Ritz Agazi says, there's a very simple answer you could give here. You don't got to be Einstein to figure out an answer. The guy ate tevel b'shoigig. He didn't know it was tevel. What is the big deal? If mitzvah avera only applies when you do it willfully, so why couldn't we say you need a pasuk in a case where you eat matzah that's tevel, that's not willfully? That you did it, you did it unintentionally. The most simplest answer. Tosfos could have thought of that one, right? You don't get the Einstein. The Achronim have other answers.
Can you say when you don't know
but since Tosfos doesn't give that answer, it's clear like day that mitzvah avera applies even b'shoigig. So therefore, that's not an answer. So that's why Tosfos blides. What does blide means? Stays. Our brisker here stays with the sarachin. That he has no answer. What do you need a pasuk to tell you? That if you eat tevel matzah, you're not yoytze. What do you need a pasuk for? Mitzvah avera. And there's no answer shoigig because even by shoigig, it's considered mitzvah haba'ah. So, but here's the Ritz Agazi. So the Ritz Agazi is like, okay, so what is it? So the Yishalmi does equivocate. So what exactly is going on in the Yishalmi? So he says, a big chiddush. He says, even though there's mitzvah ba'avera, certainly if you do it intentionally, it's avera, and even now if it's saying if you do it unintentionally, but if it's an onus situation, an onus meaning it's totally not your fault, then there would not be mitzvah ba'avera. That he's willing to accept. What would be a case of a total onus situation? Very simple. You get married to a woman, her second marriage, there's 10,000 eidim that the husband's dead, the first husband's dead. Everyone knows he's dead. Right? He was on the Titanic. Dead. Gone. And then he walks in a couple years later, the first husband walks in. No. That's an einus. That's not a shoigig. That's not a shoigig. That's an einus. If you're relying on eidim, that's einus. Or for example, another example. The law is if someone's brother died with no kids, yibum. But you have to wait 3 months. Why do you have to wait 3 months? Because maybe she's pregnant. And if she's pregnant, you don't have to yibum. You waited 6 months. She wasn't showing at all. Her stomach was flat. No, not showing anything. So the law is you wait a couple 3 months, and then that's it. And somehow, other miraculously, she had a child. She was pregnant, and it just wasn't visible. There, you're an onus. You're an onus. You're not shoigig. That's not a shoigig. So the Ritz Agazi wants to say, Shoygeg is still called mitzvah b'avera. Because still, maybe if you were extra careful, you would have been if you would have been extra wary, maybe you wouldn't have done it. Yeah, it's a shoygeg, but you're not 100% kosher with it. But Onus, even by Onus, certainly we will not say mitzvah b'avera. So says the Rit al-Gazi, even if we're going to say the Yishalmi is equivocating, or we'll say that the Ger to the Yishalmi says you are Yoitza if you have an illicit relationship, but the Rit al-Gazi says it must be talking about a case where it's Onus, where it was totally not your fault. Only then is it possible that, because then we won't apply mitzvah haba'ah b'avera. So you'll say, so then what's the Yishal? If you're going to say in Rit al-Gazi that mitzvah b'avera is not an equation in the Yishalmi because it's talking about an onus, it wasn't your fault, so what is the Yishalmi talking about in the first place? There's no mitzvah b'avera. So you can say the Yishalmi is clearing the other Shiloh. Okay, there's no mitzvah b'avera, but the kid is not the kid is not a pure pedigree. The kid is a mamzer. Maybe just by dint that the kid is a mamzer, that in itself, bottom line, will say you're not yotzim pure rivya. To be able to make, let's set this up. Set it up. On the one hand, we have the Ramah, black and white, quoting Rabbi and Rashba, no problem. Some guy cheats intentionally with an Ashes Ish, has a kid, Yoytza Pirivya, no problem. Amazing, right? No problem. Yoytza Pirivya. You obviously have to have two kids. Maybe cheat again. No, I'm not advocating that. But if you have a kid from somewhere else and you have this kid, you're good to go. Mitzvah b'avera, no problem. Mitzvah b'avera, you're Yoytza. That's the one side. On the other side is the Rit al-Gazi, and he's advocating that the Rosh and the Rif hold you not Yoitza, because at least in this case where the mamzer was created because of mitzvah baba, was created to illicit relationship, is mitzvah bava and you're not Yoitza. Okay, so it come out our baal teshuva, who is not a mamzer case, the kid is totally kosher, but bottom line is he created these kids with his wife who was a nida. That's the bottom line. So according to the Ramah, there's no problem. We don't say mitzvah b'avera is a problem by Pirivya. According to the Rit al-Gazi, it makes no difference how old this guy is. He's got to get his act together and have more kids. And by the way, this could, we're not going to get involved in that. That could mean he would have to divorce his wife, because maybe his wife is over 40, 45 already, and have to get a newer, younger wife. We don't do it nowadays for whatever reasons. But in principle, strict halacha, our baal teshuva, who at 50 years old became a baal teshuva, would have to find a new wife, because presumably his wife is too old to have kids anymore. But theoretically, according to strict halacha. Okay, so bottom line is, what is there mitzvah b'avera by Pirivya, or is there not mitzvah b'avera by Pirivya? So the famous Pri Yitzchak, who's the Pri Yitzchak? Rabbi Itzel from Petterburg, right? He says he has an open Gemara, black and white Gemara, that says there is no problem of mitzvah b'avera when it comes to Pirivya. Meaning he's saying that the Rit al-Gazi is wrong. It's open Gemara. You don't need no Yishalmi. It's an open Gemara in Bavli that the Ramah is right. Where is this Gemara? So this Gemara is in Psachim, and we have to have a teeny bit of a background to understand this Gemara. We all know that someone who is over a koris b'shoygeg has to bring a chatas, right? What is it? 36 chatas, 36 koris. I think you got to bring a carbon chatas, right? Now, a couple of cases of shas, it talks about a concept like this. Let's say you were over on you were definitely over on a koris, but you did it while you were trying to do a mitzvah. Meaning a person was endeavoring to do a mitzvah, but instead of doing a mitzvah, he ended up actually doing a chiyuv koris. Right? For example, the Gemara says you got two steaks in front of you. One steak is kachim, kosher kachim. Big mitzvah to eat kachim. Big mitzvah. Right? Big mitzvah. And then you go ahead and by accident you took the wrong steak. You got the nicer steak. What's nicer? The leftovers, right? Now, not the leftovers like cholent from Wednesday. No, not that. The leftover, you have kachim that was over the prescribed time, so it's chayv kares, right? Pretty strong. It's pretty strong that the penalty that's applied to noiser, right?
Don't leave it open.
Don't even tell my wife next time. No leftover cholent on Wednesday. None of that. Kares is no good. No, right? So you got kares. Noiser is kares. So what happened is, the Gemara says there, you're trying to do a mitzvah, you wanted to eat kachim, but you messed up. Instead of doing a mitzvah, you ate kares. You ate noiser. So the Gemara says, in one shita, we're going to count in that shita, you got to bring a chatas. You got to bring a chatas. You have to bring a chatas. Doesn't make a difference that you had good intentions. Bottom line is, it doesn't make a difference that you're taught b'dvar mitzvah. Bottom line is, you messed up. But the Gemara says, let's say you were taught b'dvar mitzvah and you actually did a mitzvah. How could that? What does that mean? You taught b'dvar mitzvah and you actually did a mitzvah. You actually a mitzvah was enacted, happened. How could that be? Very simple. Very simple. You have a kid that is already, let's say, 10, 11 days, who didn't have a bris yet. He didn't have a bris. He was yellow. Yeah, yellow. And you had another kid. Kid A was supposed to be doing the bris milah on Shabbos. You have kid A, normal, born last Shabbos, is supposed to be mild on this Shabbos. You had another kid, B, who was already a couple days late. He was yellow. So what's the law? A kid that anyway is not being mild on the right day, you don't do it on Shabbos, right? So let's say you have a kid that that was yellow, and after 12 days of Shabbos he's not yellow anymore. You don't do it on Shabbos. Only bris bismanic. What happened was you got the wrong kid. Instead of taking the kid that was supposed to be mild on Shabbos, you took the yellow kid and you mild him on Shabbos. You just over on a chorus because you were not supposed to mild that kid on Shabbos, right? But you actually did a mitzvah. You actually did a mitzvah because bottom line is that kid needed to have a bris milah, and now he had his bris milah. That's called Torah b'dvar mitzvah, the awesome mitzvah. But let's say you took a 6-day. Let's say you mixed up between an 8-day kid and a 5-day kid, and you did the 5-day kid on Shabbos. That's not called you did a mitzvah because he is not ripe yet to do the bris milah at all. He's not supposed to do the bris milah at all on Shabbos. So the Gemara talks about you don't gotta bring a korban chatas if it's Torah b'dvar mitzvah v'asa mitzvah.
What do you do with the kid that's on the 5th day?
We'll talk about it later. Now, the Gemara says like this: Ishtoi nida baal chayv. Someone had intercourse with his wife. What did she the nida? The Gemara says you got to bring a korban chatas. A nida the chorus. You got to bring a korban chatas. Yivamta nida baal pater. Let's say you live with a yavama, and she's a nida pater. You don't got to bring. Why? Why yivamta nida? You don't got to bring a chatas. So the Gemara says because you're doing a mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah of yibam. Now, let's concentrate on the other part of Gemara. Ishtoi nida baal chayv. So if you live with your wife that was a nida, you got to bring a Gemara. You got to bring a korban chatas. In fact, the Gemara, I don't understand. You're doing a mitzvah also when you live with your wife. You're doing a big mitzvah. What mitzvah? Pirvarivya. What is it saying that?
Tosfos says Bia is pirvarivya.
Right. Well, what is going on over here? Why does it say that when you live with your wife that's a nida? You didn't do any mitzvah. Why did you do any mitzvah? The Gemara says, why did you do any mitzvah? You just did the mitzvah of pirvarivya. Why not? And what does the Gemara answer? You're right. We're talking about a wife who's pregnant. You're right. The wife is pregnant, so you can't do pirvarivya if the wife is pregnant because she's already pregnant anyway. But what do you see from that Gemara? That if you live with, it's exactly our case. It's exactly the case of our baal teshuva. It's exactly the case. You live with a woman who is a nida. It says here, black and white, it is called you have done the mitzvah of pirvarivya. Because the Gemara just says, no, we have to be talking about a case where she's pregnant. But if she's not pregnant, clearly the Gemara is saying, black and white, that you are yoytze the din of mitzvah pir v'rivya. Why not? Because
Are you to the mitzvah of the stillborn or later?
no. The mitzvah is, we'll see in a minute, but simply the mitzvah is to try to have a kid. And you tried to have a kid. I did an Avera involved. She was a Nida. There was an Avera involved. Okay. So what? We don't say mitzvah baba Avera when it comes to Pir Rivya. And over here it's not an Onus. Over here we're not talking about an Onus. We're not talking about a shogig here. It's because it said Yechai V'chatas. The Gemara says why it's a shogig, why it's not an Onus. Basically, it was likely that she was about to start to menstruate. The bottom line is, what does it say here? Black and white, very clear. There is, even though you had an illicit relationship, it's called, you did the mitzvah pira v'rivya. It's an open Gemara. So the Rita Gadi says, so the Pri Yitzchak says, he doesn't understand. It's an open Gemara, and that's it. Okay, there may be ways out of it, but this is what he says. So let's root for the Ramah, the Pri Yitzchak, the Ramban, and the Rashba, your Yoitza. Pir v'rivya Yoitza, even though you did it through an illicit relationship. But why isn't that mitzvah baba vera? So why is there not mitzvah baba vera? L'chayr the Rita Gadi's taina is quite correct, right? Quite correct. L'chayr she mitzvah baba vera, you're not yoitza. So we're gonna introduce here 4 different answers. Why maybe there's not a problem of mitzvah baba vera by pir v'rivya. The first answer is from the Zayde, the Minchas Chinuch. My Zaydi is the Minchas Chinuch. He's my family. He's my maternally. He's my basically great-great-great-great-grandfather maternally. So he's my family. By the way, you got to be careful. Anyone who learns Minchas Chinuch, he knows that what does the Minchas Chinuch do? He goes through all the mitzvahs. And in each of the mitzvah, he talks about the disenfranchised, or maybe the more people who are a little bit out of the loop. He always goes through the same people. Is the tumtum chayiv in this mitzvah? What's a tumtum? Someone who you don't know his gender. Is antroigenis chayiv in this mitzvah? What's an antroigenis? Someone who has both reproductive parts. He's male and female. And then he says, what about a chetzi eved, chetzi ben chorin? What's a chetzi eved, a chetzi ben chorin? Someone who's half a slave, half free. Consistently, anyone who learns Mitzvah knows that every single mitzvah, he's going to talk about these people. He's going to talk about a tumtum, he's going to talk about a troigenis, he's going to talk about a chetzi eved, chetzi ben chorin. And so in yeshivas, there's a joke, when they want to refer to this class of people, they say, the Minchas Chinuch family. That's what they refer to them. So when I say the Minchas Chinuch family, I don't mean I'm a tumtum and troigenis. Last time I checked, right? So when I say the Minchas Chinuch family, I mean the Minchas Chinuch family.
But you're married, so you had to have it.
He's actually related. If I had time at the end of the show, I'll give you a whole story about this.
From which life?
The last Hatzi Evet, you married.
Did the Minchas Chinuch also use alliterations?
I don't know. Maybe in Hebrew, probably in Yiddish. He was Chassidish. He was the son of the Rebbe's, I think, brother-in-law. Anyway, Peter the May. So the Minchas Chinuch actually asked this question. And he says, he brings Ramah, and he says, what happened to Mitzvah Baba Vera? The Minchas Chinuch is a famous Chinuch. He holds, what is the Mitzvah of Pir V'rivya? Usually mitzvahs are pretty clear. You do the mitzvah, and the mitzvah's done. You shake the lulav, you got the mitzvah, right? You do the bris milah, you got the mitzvah.
Yeah, but here you have 9 months. Pir
V'rivya is a anomaly that you sort of try to impregnate your wife. You have intercourse, and 9 months later the kid is born. So when exactly is the mitzvah? When do you feel the mitzvah? In the great celestial scoreboard up there, when do you get like a check? When do you get a check that you've done the mitzvah? So the Minchas Chinuch holds that the bia, the intercourse is actually only a hechsher mitzvah. It's a preliminary game. It's not where it's at. when do you get the check? When you have the child. Having the child is the mitzvah. And the mitzvah is going to hold. Nebuch, an infertile, a family that a couple that has no kids, even though they tried extremely hard, they do not get the mitzvah period. I'm sure they're not going to go to Gehenna when they go up to Shemayim. There's not going to be any claims against them. But bottom line is, in the celestial court scoreboard upstairs, you try to have kids, it don't make no difference. You don't get the mitzvah until you actually have the kids. He brings two proofs, basically. He brings two proofs. One proof is, the Gemara says famously, if you have many kids, and you're 80 years old, and you have many kids and you have grandchildren, and God forbid they all die, children and grandchildren. The Gemara says you're not yoiched to peer review. You're not yoiched to peer review. You gotta start over.
He died before he died.
Obviously, if he's dead, it's not much you can do about it. At least in the good old days. So yeah. So if he's dead already, there's not much you can do about it. But if he's not dead, he's got to start all over again. Nope. So what do you see from there? The main mitzvah is to have the kids. And if the kids are not there anymore, the mitzvah has basically undone. Another famous raya is,
You didn't fulfill the
it
mitzvah.
says that if you had a kids when you were a guy, you were a guy, and you had many kids, and then you become a ger, the law is, you were yoiched to peer review. That's it, you don't got to do peer review. Now, how is it possible that you can't do mitzvah when you're a goy? How is it possible? How could it be yoiched to peer review if you had a kid when you're a goy? Now you're a ger, now you're Jewish. How is it possible?
Because the kid is still alive when you are here.
The kids are still alive.
Yeah.
I don't want to get involved. It's a big kiddush because the kids are goyim even. I don't want to get involved in that. But bottom line, that's what it says. You had
mitzvah is to
10
multiply. It doesn't say
kids
Jews.
when you were a goy. Now you become a ger. You are still considered that still you did peer review.
What if you do a mitzvah?
Considered you did peer review. That's the bottom line. How could it be you did peer review?
What if you're Jew with the goy? Same question.
How do you do peer review? The mitzvah you did it when you were a goy. You did the mitzvah when you were a goy. So what do you think there says the mitzvah sinner? You see from there that the mitzvah is not doing the mitzvah is not having beer, having intercourse. The mitzvah is to have kids.
It doesn't say Jewish kids here.
Obviously, usually you have to have kids. The way you do this is you have intercourse. That's the way you usually do it. But that's just a hexha mitzvah. That's just an aside. The main mitzvah is to have kids. That is the mitzvah. So if you're 80 years old and you have 20 kids, but they all died, God forbid, the mitzvah's gone. You need the mitzvah. On the contrary, you had the kids when you were a goy, and now you're a Jew. You became a ger. Bottom line is you have kids. Your biological kids. And that's good enough. That's good enough. When are you doing the mitzvah? You're doing it now. How are you doing it now? Because you have the kids. So this is the famous shita of the mitzvah chinuch, that the bia is just a hechsher mitzvah, and the main mitzvah period is just to have the kids. And according to him, if you're infertile, if you're infertile, if you don't have any kids, you didn't do the mitzvah. That's his famous shita. So, according to Michas Chinuch's understanding, it's very clear why there's no concept of mitzvah baal ba'avera. It's very clear. When do we say mitzvah baal ba'avera? Mitzvah baal ba'avera is only based on what we learned in the morning, when while you're doing the mitzvah, the avera is avera. But let's say you want to eat matzah, and you go ahead and you drive your car on Shabbos to get to the matzah, and you mechal Shabbos to bake the matzah. No one's going to say you're not mitzvah b'avera on the matzah that you eat, even though it was preceded by an avera. That avera is the history. Okay, you drove your car on Shabbos to get the matzah. You baked on Shabbos, but that's history. When do we say? Bottom line is when you're eating the matzah, there's no avera involved. So when do we say mitzvah b'avera? I'm sure you all heard this in the morning, based on Tosfos. It's only when simultaneously while you're doing the mitzvah avera. So let's analyze our case. Yes, it was terrible. You did an illicit relationship. You had beer with Nida or with an H.S.ish. The bottom line is, when is the mitzvah happening? 9 months later. According to the mitzvah, when does the mitzvah happen? 9 months later. The beer is only a preparatory. It's only an aside. But when the mitzvah comes to fruition, no pun intended, when the mitzvah comes to fruition, there's no avera happening. I happened 9 months ago. So, therefore, this mitzvah is going to claim the Veda. It's not possible mitzvah avera. It's impossible.
So you say you could fulfill the mitzvah of surrogacy, for fertility, and all those.
Excellent. That's right. Right. I don't want to get involved in that, but according to mitzvah, it's clear if you have children through IVF, it sure will be called children. It sure will be called your children. Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the beer. The main thing is just to have the kids. Now, so let's get it all set up. We're advocating that yes, you're a yotza even though you have kids through a illicit relationship. And we don't care about mitzvah b'avera. Peer Rivia has nothing. We don't care if there was a mitzvah b'avera by Peer Rivia. Based on the Mitzvah Chinuch, it makes a lot of sense. Because by the time the mitzvah comes into fruition, comes to be, the avera is long gone. Okay, this is the famous sheet of the Mitzvah Chinuch, but it's a little bit sad for kids, for people who never had children. We're basically telling them, sorry, you've been trying for the last 30 years, tough luck. You don't get the mitzvah. Tough luck. Okay. Most achronim think what the Mitzvah Chinuch say is sort of is not tenable. It's just not. It doesn't make any sense. They ask this exact question: are you telling me someone who's 30 years has been trying to have kids and never didn't have kids? When he goes up to Shemayim says, "Okay, first mitzvah, pre-review." No, you didn't do it. Sorry, guys.
What's so schwer about
It can't
that?
be. It can't be. It cannot be.
Well, the Kohanim these days.
Logically, what the mitzvah said is a little bit illogical, because usually mitzvahs mean what God wants you to do. What you don't have control over seemingly should not go into the realm of mitzvah. You don't have control whether you want to get pregnant. You don't have control if you're going to have a boy and a girl. You may have 10 girls. You're right. You don't want 10 girls. At least 9 and 1 boy, right? You don't want 10 girls. But you don't have control. It's very unbelievable what the Mitzvah Chinuch is saying. That Pir V'Rivya, basically the mitzvah that you can't control. It's not in your realm. The Gemara says, famously in Shabbos, when you go up to Shemayim, one of the questions are, Esakta b'Pir V'Rivya. Did you
try?
Right, did you try? What does Esakta mean? What does the word Esakta mean? Did you toil? Right? Did you invest? It's clearly from the Lashon, the implication is that the mitzvah is you're trying. Right? So, common sense, I would also argue the mitzvah. Right? Exactly. So most achronim disagree with the mitzvah. They say the mitzvah is just to try. And when the infertile couple goes up there after 30 years, they get big peer review, big banner. You did great peer review, great job, guys. All right, we had no kids. You tried. That's called you get the mitzvah peer review. But the Mitzvah Chinuch has a good raya. He has seemingly a definitive raya. It says if you're a goy and you have a bunch of kids, and then you become a ger, you yoitza peer review. How to say? If you're a goy, you shake a lulav, and then you become a ger. Yoitza. If you're a goy and you eat matzah, you become a ger right away. No, of course not. You can't do a mitzvah when you're a goy. So how in the world are you yoitza peer review if you're a guy? How is it possible? So the Achronim explain quite cogently. They explain you're mixing up the Gemara. The Gemara does not mean there you're yoitza peer review. But if you're a guy and you become a ger, you are not yoitza peer review. It just means you don't have a chiyuv to do peer review. It means you have a patur. It just means that you don't have that mitzvah. You don't have the obligation. Since bottom line is there's biological kids in the world because of you don't have that obligation. It's not upon you. Like Yisrael. Does Yisrael have an obligation to eat truma? Of course not. He's not a kohen. Same thing. This guy, the guy who became a ger, listen, you don't have the obligation. You want to have more kids because they. But there's no obligation. It's a tour. It's a fulfillment. Not a fulfillment, but it's a you don't have the obligation. You don't have the obligation. And the guy who's 80 years old and he had 20 kids, when he goes up to Shemayim, many mitzvahs. Pre-review. Every time that you live with your wife, pre-review. The bottom line is, all those kids died, God forbid. Got to keep on going. You got to do it again. The pre-review is not 1 time, 2 times. Pre-review, according to what we're saying now, pre-review is 1,000 times, 100,000 times. Every time you live with your wife.
So what would that
Until
be?
you have 2 kids.
First of all,
If
it's
you
a-
had the 2 kids, you have a patur. If they die, the mitzvah is reactivated. Doesn't mean retroactively you lost the mitzvah. No, you have the mitzvah. You have the mitzvah, but
Doesn't
now
Shmuel say
you
boy
have
and
a
girl?
new
If that's the
obligation.
kids?
Okay, so wait. So this is what I would feel is the more plausible understanding of the pre-review. The mitzvah is the bia, whether you're successful or not successful. But until you're successful, you have the mitzvah. You have to continue doing it. Like learn Torah. How much Torah you got to learn? Always, every day, every minute, every second. You have a mitzvah. The pre-review also, all the time. You got to keep on doing it until you have the 2 kids. Then you're not obligated anymore. The guy never had an obligation when he became a ger. Oh, so let's analyze. If you have this understanding, let's go to our case. A man cheats with a woman, God forbid, or a man is about teshuva, and he has a kid through a neither relationship. Will we say with Yoitza Pirivya? According to this analysis, he was not Yoitza Pirivya. That's right, Mitzvah Babavera. But if he had a kid, he doesn't have to do Pirivya anymore. Think about it. This guy who lived with a neither or lived with Yeshivat, he's not any worse than a goy. Mitzvah Babavera is not going to be any worse than a goy having kids. So just like we said, if a goy has kids, and subsequently he becomes a ger, we said you don't got to do pre-review, but you didn't get the mitzvah, you don't get the credit, but you don't got to do pre-review anymore. Same to here. Yes, you did mitzvah above there. You live with an ida, you live with an ish. You do not get the credit, but you're not worse than a guy who had a kid. You're not worse than a guy who had a kid. So hence, our Baal Tshuva is sort of in a limbo situation. Were you yoitz the pre-review? No, but you don't have to have more kids. You do not have to have more kids because a patur you do have. Because bottom line is there are kids in the world because of you. Mitzvah Bavera will not take away that fact. Again, Mitzvah Bavera can't be worse than a guy having kids. It can't be worse than that. Okay? So, what would we tell our, based on this understanding, what would we tell our about tshuva? We would tell about tshuva like this. In principle, you don't have to have more kids. Did you do the mitzvah? No. In principle, so it's like it's quasi. Were you yoitz the pre-review? No, but you don't have to have more kids. It's a little lump this year. Now, but here's the big thing. We all know there's something called, I don't know if you noticed, but Haredi families, some of them have 10, 20, 30, 40 kids, right? Why are they having so many kids? Because we know there's a Gemara based on a pasuk in Kehelis, Al Tancha Yadcha Beis Erev. It's a good thing to have more kids. Now, but you pay for the bill. I was like. Now, this is a very big machlokes. Is that a mitzvah d'Rabbanan or is that a mitzvah d'Chasidus? And this has a lot to do with family planning. If you hold it's a mitzvah d'Chasidus, you already had your 2 kids. You had a boy and a girl. No. If things are tough, you don't have to have more kids. If you hold it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, then you have to have. Then you need a lot more to introduce. Basically. Not to have more kids. This is an open-end child. Obviously, if you ask the Hasidim, they'll say, no, it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Besides all the Kabbalah issues, but there's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. If you go a little bit more to the left, they'll say, no, it's the mitzvah Hasidim, it's a nice thing to have more kids. And basically, based on your rabbi, you're going to get your answer. Whether you could use contraceptives or stuff like that or not. But be it as it may, our Baal Tshuva, there is a strong thought to say that he has an extra chiyuv to have more kids. It's true. The Baal Tshuva will say, you aren't yoitza pre-review, but you don't have to do pre-review. You aren't yoitza, but you don't have to. You aren't yoitza because it's mitzvah bavera, but you don't have to because bottom line is there are kids in the world, so you get the patur, just like the goy. But for you, there's maybe an extra issue to have more kids. Because since you didn't do pirvurvi at all, then maybe there's an extra chiv on you to be Mekai in the pasuk of Al Tan Chayotcha Be'ez Erev. Because usually, the usual case is, a person did pirvurvi, he got the mitzvah, he got everything, and now the question is, do you have more kids? This guy is a liminal, this guy is in between. He really didn't do pirvurvi. He did, and he didn't.
But he doesn't have to do the mitzvah, he still has to
So
do it.
there's more, you could hear, this is what the Rav answered, Lev Ram answered. For you, he felt that there's an extra chiv to you to yes have more kids. So at least you could be Mekayim Al Tan Chayot Chabeis Erev, because in pirvurivya, you really didn't do it. That's what the answer that was given.
If you actually more kids, well, one study putter, if you had more kids,
No. You're potter. I mean, you can't shake a lulav on Hanukkah time. Don't worry. You're potter. Okay? Now,
Preparation.
I'm going to give you another two answers. But how long are we going for already?
15 minutes already.
When I was a young lad, now this answer, I would never say this, but it seems to me that the Shilas Yavid says this. I'm not 1,000% sure. But when I was a young lad of 23, 24, just married, I went with my shver, may he be very healthy. We went to some type of kiruv convention or kiruv class, and my shver said, you could speak. I was so nervous. It was like my first time doing public speaking. I'm still nervous when I do public speaking. You guys are nice. And I prepared. It was a Shabbos, it was a class on Shabbos. So I decided I'm going to talk about the classic understanding of Shabbos as 39 malachis don't mean how much effort you put in or how much sweat you put into do malacha. You can move a couch all day and all night. It has to do with creativity, a creative act. 39 malachas are creative acts. It was a whole speech, but that was part of the punchline, right? You all know this. 39 malachis on Shabbos have nothing to do with how much toil and effort. So there I am. I'm all yeshivish, and I'm giving this shiur to totally not religious Jews. Totally not religious. And I'm explaining to them there's creative acts, and then there's 39 malachas represent creative acts, and it has nothing to do with how much toil you do. Right? And my shred is listening, and all of a sudden, some guy gets up and says, Rabbi, tell me, are you allowed to live with your wife on Shabbos? I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, isn't that a creative act? That was his question. I was so shocked. It was a good question, and I could come up with 25 answers. But then I was so young and so shocked how I thought I was so much better than these people. And this guy gets up and just asks me this very good question, and sort of I went blank. So my father-in-law was there on the side, and he gave the answer for me. He said, it is true that intercourse or whatever, living with your wife is a creative act. You have kids, but what is the reason why most people live with their wife? There may be some ulterior motives over there. There may be other reasons why you do it, right? I'm not going to go through a whole pachid yitzhak. Why is it that there's so much? Why is the creative act is connected with so much pleasure? We'll leave that one day. Come to me. That's a philosophical question. It's a really good philosophical question, right? The practical answer is because else no one would have kids. Because having kids is so difficult. If it wasn't that you got some type of amazing pleasure, a lot of pleasure, you wouldn't have the kids. But be that as it may. So my father-in-law said, listen, it is true that intercourse is a creative act. But 99% of people, and at 99% of the attention, is not for the creativity. Even if you want to have kids, most of the time it's related to for your own personal pleasure. Hence, it's not called creative act. This is what my father-in-law answered. It's a very good job. They all talk about that. Wait a minute. This is what my father-in-law answered. I would have answered something different, but that's what he answered.
What would you answer?
Bottom line is,
What would you answer?
so that's why it's not called a creative act. Bottom line is, based on Shilas Yavid, he said something very similar. He says, the first mitzvah Torah Piruvim, to have kids. But bottom line is, it's very hard to have that intention. There's so much it's fraught or there's so much ulterior motive. It's very hard to say pirivivia should be pristine, a pure mitzvah only for God. That's what we want. What do we want? We want a mitzvah totally for God. That's what we want. It's very hard for pirivivia to even get close to that realm. Even close, matzah. Everyone loves matzah, right? We love eating matzah. The bottom line is, you could also have the intention that, you're doing it today because he's trying.
Suffering for the mitzvah.
But pirivivia, where there's so much hana involved, so says, it could be. I'm not exactly sure what Shias Yav is saying, that since pirivivia, by definition, is so fraught with, I wouldn't use the word impurity, but I would use the word, it's very pure, but I would use the word of ulterior motive. So, and Shammai said, it's very hard to have a kavanah, mitzvah kavanah, it's very hard to have kavanah pirivivia. It could be there won't be a problem with mitzvah very easy. Basically, since the act of bia is already tainted in some way, no matter how hard you try, there's some type of taint to it. So basically, by pirivivia, we don't care what's going on in your mind. We don't care how you're doing it. We don't care if there's a very involved. Because anyway, even if you do it the best way, it's tainted in some way. I would never say this. I just wanted to say the story with my shver. I thought it was a great story. But Shias Yav says something. I may be reading it wrong. So that's a third reason why it could be there won't be a mitzvah haba'ah. The fourth reason, which I really think is the real answer, I would venture. It's similar to the second one, but it's a little bit different. I would venture to say the whole concept of mitzvah avera is only by a certain school of mitzvahs. There's a certain school of mitzvahs that have to do with the metaphysical, have to do with abstract. Shaking a lulav. Some guy sees you shaking lulav. I think you're nuts. What are you doing over there, right? Korban. What exactly? Or even eating matzah. There are certain mitzvahs that are basically called certain mitzvahs that are metaphysical, have to do with abstract. And there are certain mitzvahs that have to do with the bottom line, empirical result. Right? For example, a mica. You put it's a mitzvah to put a mica around the roof, right? The gate around the roof, a makkah. Clearly, there's a very clear reason behind it that people shouldn't fall, right? It's very clear. There's nothing abstract there, nothing metaphysical, right? Lulav is clearly the other way. What are you shaking lulav for? You look crazy. Oh, no, I'm not crazy. God said do it to thank Him for the produce, whatever the reason is. I would venture to say mitzvah haba'ah avera would not apply to the mitzvahs that have a reason, a empirical or a bottom line, very terrestrial reason, a very down-to-earth reason that it should be done.
Eating the matzah.
For example, let's say you did a terrible avera while you made the makkah. You did a terrible avera. I don't know what. You can say, oh, mitzvah avera, you're not yotzei makkah because you did it with mitzvah avera. It's hard for me to believe. Okay. I did avera when I did the makkah, but bottom line is it's there. So my guess would be by pirivivia, it goes into that group. Pirivivia has nothing to do with metaphysical or abstract. God needs the world to be populated. That is the purpose of pirivivia. Bottom line is. So you only say mitzvah haba'ah avera by the first class of mitzvahs. You're shaking a lulav. What are you doing over there? I'm doing something metaphysical. Yeah, but you're doing it with an avera. It's just a contradiction. I'm trying to appease God by shaking lulav. What do you appease God by shaking lulav? You stole the lulav. I'm trying to make God be happy because I give him a korban. What are you talking about? You just robbed the bank to get the korban. What are you talking about? Right? But by pirivivia, it's not in the abstract, it's not in the metaphysical. It's in the reality that we want kids. So we don't say mitzvah avera by these type of mitzvahs. Any mitzvah, the point is that we want a bottom line. When I say a bottom line, is we want some reality to be created in the world, not a spiritual reality. We wouldn't say mitzvah avera. The four answers. Why is there no mitzvah avera pirivivia? We have to make a chinuch that the whole bee is the hechsher mitzvah. So there's no concept of mitzvah avera because the time the mitzvah comes into the world, the avera is long gone. Second answer, the takadu say mitzvah avera. Yes, you are not yotzei pirivivia when you live with Eishes or with your nida. But the bottom line is, you don't have to. You have a patur. You're no worse than the guy who had kids, and now you became
about
you became a ger.
Question on the side.
Answer number 3. It's not Shaykh Pirivya, Mitzvah Bavera Pirivya, because since living with a woman or intercourse is so fraught with other ulterior motives, we can never get it right. So we don't. The whole concept of Mitzvah Bavera doesn't apply by Pirivya. And so 4, which is what I thought, which is I think is clear answers. A certain class of mitzvahs don't apply the concept of mitzvah avera. But the class of mitzvah is to get something, a bottom line result, an empirical, realistic bottom line result. We don't say they're mitzvah baba avera. So bottom line is, our baal teshuva friend who had kids when he was erstwhile frum, now before he was frum, it seems that he does not have to have more kids, at least because of Pirivya. Okay, everybody, so we'll stop over here.